Hello YouTube, welcome to a Season 6 Patch 6.14 guide on mid lane Viktor, the Machine Herald.
Join the glorious evolution.
So why would you want to play Viktor? Well, he's one of the best AoE damage mages in the entire game. He's got incredible AoE burst damage, and AoE stun, and even gains AP per level from his passive item. Since you're gaining all this AP per level, you're also outscaling all the other mages, which makes you an insanely big threat late game considering all the AoE you bring as well. Your abilities, which are already great, only get better when you evolve them, and you don't even have a cast time on your Death Ray. This means if you're in a bad situation and you're running away, you can still cast your Death Ray behind you while you're doing so and still add a bunch of damage while you are escaping. This damage you're doing while running away can sometimes catch people completely off guard, and you can end up turning around and deleting them instantly. Now, although he's a very popular meta pick right now, he still has a bunch of cons, the biggest one being his lack of mobility and escape. Since we're an AoE mage, we also go for a high AP build of course, so we can melt multiple targets, which means we're also very squishy. Because of these cons, he's very important to learn how to position correctly. If you're caught in a bad position, you could die instantly and contribute absolutely nothing to your team in a team fight. Because of the positioning and the fact that he has skill shots, he's also rather hard to master. If you're missing your skill shots, you're either doing a lot less damage or you're not landing that very crucial AoE slow / stun. Since Viktor's a fast comboing mage, we go 12 Ferocity and 18 Cunning, grabbing Thunderlord's Decree as our Keystone Mastery. By far his best choice since we use skill combinations rather quick, and we rely on that little added burst to delete targets. Throughout the tree, we grab just a little bit of added sustain and pretty much focus on getting as much plus damage and magic penetration as possible in the build. For our runes, we grab magic penetration reds, scaling health yellows, scaling cooldown reduction blues, and magic resist blues, and ability power quints. Viktor can struggle a little bit getting the cooldown reduction since he has to go, of course, for a perfect hex core. That item has no cooldown reduction. The 6 scaling cooldown reduction blues will then come in really nice, adding 10% extra cooldown reduction at level 18. Since we won't have a ton of magic resist in the mid lane, we then want to get the scaling health so we remain at least a little bit tanky against our AP opponent. Of course, if you do get something like a Zed picked into you, you may want to take the armor instead. The rest is self-explanatory. You want ability power so your pokes do more, and the magic penetration to get through any early magic resist. Viktor's a champion who makes great use of multiple summoners, and they will pretty much change game to game. One we of course take 100% of the time, however, is Flash. You're incredibly squishy, you have no escape, so Flash will save your life in tons and tons of different situations. So Ghost, Barrier, and Heal are all great secondary summoner spells. Ghost, however, is my go-to as it's great for repositioning in teamfights and can be great for chasing opponents or escaping. If you're against a mid lane assassin, however, you may want to get either Barrier or Heal. Barrier's best against a champion that does really quick bursts that you know is very predictable, like say a Zed ultimate. It's also great against champions rushing Morellonomicon, as if you took Heal, of course that heal would be reduced. Heal, however, is better against unpredictable damage, or if you needed that short duration movement speed. Heal would be great against something like Talon because his burst isn't as predictable and you could perhaps even move out of his ultimate before it went off. So now we're going to look at each of his abilities, starting with his passive, Glorious Evolution. So this is an exclusive item that Viktor gets at the beginning of the game. This item makes you scale hard into the game as it gives decent mana per level and some AP. This can actually be pretty nice because Viktor is a rather mana hungry mage and this extra mana can actually make a big difference. Since this passive makes all your abilities better as well, we want to get this rather early on in the game. Since the stacking stats go up as well as we upgrade the item, it's a very viable option to rush this item as soon as possible. Now in our build we do get the Hex Core Mark 1 and Mark 2 rather quick, and then get a core item, and then finally get the perfect Hex Core. We'll look at that a little bit later on in the guide, but overall this is a great passive which gives you some nice passive stacking stats. So next up is your Q, Siphon Power, and this lets you be aggressive right from level 1. So this ability shields yourself for 8% of your maximum mana, plus 15% of your AP, for 2.5 seconds, and it deals magic damage to the enemy, and modifies his next basic attack to deal extra magic damage. So the magic damage it does is between 60 and 140, plus 40% AP, and the discharge damage is between 20 and 100, plus 100% AD, and 50% AP. So we take this skill at level 1 because it really asserts some dominance. You'll be able to trade incredibly well since you'll be doing a bunch of damage, making your auto attack do a lot more damage, and also have a shield so you're not taking any return damage. Now this isn't the ability you max first, that would be your E, but this is incredible to have at level 1, and not many champions can deal with this ability at level 1. So when you upgrade this ability with your Hex Core, you instantly gain 30% bonus movement speed for 2.5 seconds when you use this ability. This is a fantastic upgrade as he's very immobile and that bonus movement speed does a lot for him. However, yet again, your E, Death Ray, does have a much better augment, so we have to leave this one yet again for second. Next up is our AoE slow and stun, Gravity Field. So this ability leaves a little AoE slow on the ground for 4 seconds. The slow amount is between 28 and 44%. Now when a champion is in that slow zone, enemies generate a stack every 0.5 seconds. When they have 3 stacks, they are knocked down and stunned for 1.5 seconds. Basically all that means, if you can keep somebody in this zone for 1.5 seconds, they'll be knocked down and be stunned for 1.5 seconds. It's a pretty decent ability. It can be sometimes hard to get the actual stun, especially if you're against very mobile champions. Even if you're not actually knocking down people, it can still be a great ability though because you can zone people into different areas. Now when you upgrade this ability, units that are stunned by it are dragged into the center. So it's just an okay augment. I mean, honestly, it's not a big deal, and that's why we take it last. Although it's not an incredible CC, it still works really well with champions that can hold people down to combo. If you're with a really strong ganking jungler like a Warwick, you can combo this under his ultimate and nobody is going to get away. Next up is our E, Death Ray, and this is Viktor's bread and butter ability. This is the ability we want to max first as it's our main source of damage. This ability is both our main source of poke and wave clear. I kinda touched on this before, but Death Ray has no cast time and you can use it while you're moving, making it a very strong spell and why movement speed is such a huge factor in mastering Viktor. Now when we augment this, which is what we do first, an explosion follows Death Ray's wake after a second, dealing additional magic damage. The main problem is it's a 1 second delay and people are already trying to dodge your Death Ray, so it may be somewhat hard to actually land this augmented version. However, in teamfights where there's some sorts of crowd control or people are in your gravity field or other such things, this can be absolutely devastating damage. Our last ability is of course our ultimate, Chaos Storm. This is a great AoE damage ultimate that he summons at the target location, and it also interrupts channeled abilities, which makes it great against stuff like Katarina. The Singularity then remains active for 6.5 seconds and deals magic damage to all nearby enemies every 2 seconds. So on his second cast, he directs it towards the target location, and when it hits an enemy champion, it automatically follows them until they escape or die. Now if you're closer to your storm, it moves faster, but it always moves at maximum speed if it's moving towards you. The augmented version is nice in the fact that it gives it an extra 20% movement speed. This can be absolutely great as it can catch up to a lot more champions that are somewhat mobile and still finish off those targets. The one downside is you have to constantly control the Singularity for maximum damage output, but you also have to control yourself for a good position in a team fight. Doing both at the same time is what really sets apart good and bad Viktors. For our ability order, we of course max our ultimate first as it does some nice AoE sweeping damage. For yet more AoE sweeping damage, we take our E, Death Ray, as our first basic ability. We follow it up with our Q, Siphon Power, although we do take this at level 1 for the great trading utility it provides early on in the game. Last, of course, as it adds no damage at all, is our Gravity Field. We do take 1 point into it at level 4 for the AoE stun it can provide, but then we leave it for last. Our Hex Core Upgrade Order is basically the same as our ability order. For the added damage, we first take the E, Death Ray. We then upgrade our Siphon Power, since when we use the ability, we get 30% movement speed for 2.5 seconds, which is fantastic on a very immobile champion. Last, of course, has to be our Gravity Field, which just does a little pull to the center if people get stunned in the zone. At this point, all 3 are then finally upgraded, and our ultimate now gets 20% movement speed, which is awesome. In the early game, you want to try trading as much as possible right from level 1. Since your Q is so strong, you're going to be able to outtrade the majority of the mid laners out there, so make sure you do so. At level 2, you'll be able to keep doing this, but add in the odd Death Ray, although you might want to wait till level 3 when it actually does more damage. As for your Gravity Field, well, you pretty much want to save this for when you're getting ganked, since you're very gankable. It'd also be great to use if your jungler is coming in for a gank, so you can hopefully chain CC with him, depending on the champion he is, of course. Just be sure to note that if you do use your gravity field to get a kill, you are very gankable when the ability's on cooldown. If you're against a mid laner who struggles at last hitting under tower, try and push them under tower as much as possible with your Death Ray. This could really cost them a lot of CS, giving you a big CS advantage, in return making mid lane a lot easier. Viktor's a champion with insanely strong wave clear, so in the mid game you pretty much want to try to push mid and start looking to take some objectives or helping your team by roaming. Now you're not the fastest roamer out there, but your ganks are still pretty solid since you add a lot of damage and a pretty nice crowd control. If, however, you're on the losing team, you pretty much just want to try to stall the game as much as possible so either yourself or your team can finally catch up. Delay is the name of the game until you find somebody out of position or you finally feel comfortable going for a team fight. Late game's pretty much all about team fights and objectives. You'll want to try and poke down the enemy team as much as possible before a team fight breaks out so your team will have an advantage. When doing this, however, make sure you don't end up in the damn front line. You're incredibly squishy, and if the enemy team sees you out of position, they will jump on you and destroy you. Just use your Death Ray from afar and Gravity Field to stun their front line. You'll then want to combo this with your Chaos Storm so you can destroy the front line's health bar. Now, as you don't have any escapes in your kit, do not hesitate to use Flash or Ghost if you get caught, as this generally can be your only way of actually escaping. Don't be one of those people that don't use their summoners and then realize, oh shit, I should have used it in a certain situation and can contribute it a lot more in a team fight. Now for our item build, which starts with a Doran's Ring, Health Potion, and Warding Totem. On our first back, we want to try to have at least 1,000 gold so we can get our Mark 1. At this point, we'll be able to upgrade our Death Ray and start doing that massive AoE damage that the enemy team always hates. Now I'm one of those Viktor players that really loves the Rylai's Crystal Scepter. With all of the AoE damage he does, the AoE slow this item provides is absolutely incredible. This can make hitting people with your augmented Death Ray a lot easier, and of course your Chaos Storm will stick on them a hell of a lot easier. After this item, we'll want to grab the Mark II and upgrade our Q ability so we get that movement speed, and finally move into Ionian Boots so we actually get some cooldown reduction finally. Now at this point, we could either get an Abyssal Scepter, or we could get the perfect Hex Core. This kind of relies on what your team is like and what their team is like, but generally I like to get the Abyssal Scepter first and then get the perfect Hex Core. We finish off our example full build with a Void Staff and Rabadons. This will give us massive amounts of AP and the magic penetration to destroy those high MR targets. The one problem with this full build, as much as I love it, is the fact that we're still missing 10% CDR. So all of these alternatives are great ways of getting CDR, although of course Luden's is not a CDR item, but it is great for the movement speed it provides. So there's a bunch of things in this build that you could replace. So the first one I would probably do if I didn't need the magic resist would be replacing the Abyssal Scepter with the Morellonomicon. This would allow us to keep the Rylai's and everything else and have that extra 10% CDR hitting the 40% cap. Of course, if you're also against a full AD team, you may want to get rid of the Abyssal Scepter and put in the Zonias, but you will still remain at 30% CDR. Now another item people do replace is the Rylai's. Now I am a huge Rylai's fan, but some people do prefer not having the slow and just having additional damage, and they could get that from the Lichbane. This is a fantastic item that adds a ton of damage to Viktor and would give you the 40% CDR yet again. Now this is an item I do pick up fairly often, but it really depends on the enemy team I'm facing and what my team provides. In situations where my team doesn't have a lot of CC and the enemy team is rather mobile, I still always stick with the Rylai's. The slow it provides is too strong, and with my movement speed I get while ghosting, I can keep people slowed permanently and kite them, doing additional damage with my Death Ray while doing so. Now if you're against one of those really shitty teams that for some reason gets no magic resist against a Viktor, I suppose you could always replace the Void Staff. This honestly won't happen that often, unless you're in Wood League. So that's it. Just like that, the guide's over. If you guys did enjoy the guide, please like and subscribe, as we're going to have League of Legends content coming out daily. You can also view our guides on our website, www.egamingtv.com, or you could enter our skin giveaways on our Twitter at egaming_TV. Thank you guys a ton for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.